Hey everybody, I'm Anna McEwen. And now for Bob Switzer with the Epic Narrative.
All right, welcome everyone. My goodness, can you believe it? We're at season 5 and we still have plenty of material. We could keep the Epic Narrative going for at least 10 more years. I really believe that. I think we got at least 10 more seasons. We might not get out of the Old Testament in 10 more seasons. And I just want you to know, those of you that stuck with it all the way through the books of the law, I just want you to know that's awesome. You guys are awesome. I honestly, I listened to it and I often thought this is needed, right? But it's not necessarily really interesting. It's not like a story. Most of it's not a story. Most of it has to do with concepts and how to, the ability to see God's goodness in these laws that were written in such a way that made it look like every time you cross the line, you're going to die. So if you haven't listened to season 4, it's a good one to work your way through. I don't know about if season 4 is really a binge worthy one, like season 1, people binge, season 2, people binge. Season 3, Exodus, doesn't have as many stories in it as you think, or at least not as many as I thought. I'm not sure why I thought it had so many stories in it, but again, we learn a lot about the law, a lot about the heart of God, and then we just continue that with Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, all of which, again, needed in the grand epic narrative. I think we need those things, and we at least need them for the reference point to go back to. But season 5, we get back into the story, the epic story, the epic narrative, and we start, of course, with Joshua. But for those of you that haven't, that maintained your connection to what we do here at the Epic Narrative, and you got all the way through those things, man, congratulations. You're such a place of encouragement for me. And, you put up with all my Bob thoughts, as scattered as they might be. I appreciate that as well. You guys are awesome. For those of you that are keeping score at home, just about at the beginning of every season, I let you know that I still have one unread message in my Gmail account. I don't know where it is. I have searched everywhere. I have clicked every button I could that says mark all as read, but it's still one left. And I have switched computers and I have restarted computers and it doesn't matter. It doesn't, I don't know if we'll ever find it, but I generally give at least one update a season as to whether or not I've been able to find it. And after another whole season, it is still there. So it's my little OCD thing. Every day I look down, it's like, oh, I don't have a Gmail. I don't. I just have one I can't find. Of course, there are those that aren't like that, like my wife, who has 10,000 emails she hasn't opened, but she says she knows they're all just junk mail and advertisements and things she doesn't need, but they're also unopened, or untrashed, which I don't understand. But I suppose if you had 10,000 of them, to now go back and get rid of them would be, about a month and a half project. You'd have to work a long time at it. Anyways, enough about that. We got to get talking about Joshua, or as they would say, Yeshua, which of course sounds a lot like Jesus, doesn't it? It does. It makes a lot of people happy to know that Jesus is Yeshua of the Old Testament, right? Same thing. All right. So there you go. Why Joshua? Well, we got that first verse, and I can tell you right now, that's about as far as we're going to get today. And Moses went up from the plains of Moab into the mountain of Nebo. Whoops, wrong chapter. That was the Deuteronomy. See, I told you, I just got done with that. Just got done with that season. Now, after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, it came to pass that the Lord spoke unto Joshua, So I wanted to just spend some time as to like why Joshua, right? Moses dies in Deuteronomy 34. He had that supernatural magic carpet ride over the promised land. It was a whole new world. And the Lord just showed him everything. It was amazing. But that was the end of that. He wasn't allowed to go in. And it's also noted in Deuteronomy 34 that he died with never having lost his eyesight, which was a normal thing, because they often lived past 100. Their eyes would go dim, and they would eventually become almost blind. And Moses didn't have that experience. A lot of people believe it's because he sat in the presence of God so often and had that eternal connection, that his eyesight was a reflection of that. Some believe that it had to do with that one moment where he went up to the mountains and he came back glowing, that his skin and his eyes were transported back to original form, which would have been almost like baby soft skin and perfect eyesight. But he never lost it. He died at 120 years old. He never lost that perfect eyesight. It also could speak to his spiritual eyesight as well, that he never lost the ability to see the revelation of God. And that's an awesome thing to have all the way to the end. But Moses is buried by God. And it says in verse 9, sorry, I have to keep opening my what is that thing called? Phone. I have to keep opening my phone because I don't have the ability to print. The early seasons, I would literally print the entire book of whatever it was we were working on, and I could post, tape that up all I had to do was like look at the wall and see what was going on. But now I have to keep opening up my yes, I know I could go to settings and shut off the. I probably will. Maybe the next episode. Here we go. He speaks to them. There shall be. Anyways, the Lord speaks to where am I trying to get to? Oh, verse 9. Sorry. Thank you, Bob. Let's see. Bob, always a pleasure to have you back. You ready for a new season? Of course you are. All right. Verse 9. Have not I commanded thee? Be strong and of good courage. Be not afraid, neither be thou dismayed, for the Lord thy God is with thee wheresoever thou goest. So Joshua was anointed by Moses. And it says in verse 10, then, oh my gosh, Bob. Verse 9. You're literally, I should have printed these out. This is terrible. Okay. Deuteronomy 34, verse 9. And Joshua, son of Nun, was full of the spirit of wisdom, for Moses had laid his hands on him, and the children of Israel hearkened unto him and did as the Lord commanded Moses. So here we see that Moses anointed Joshua, and what that means is when he anointed Joshua, the elders listened to Joshua, implying that they were going to submit to the vision, the direction that Joshua was going to bring. And they were also going to submit to his judgment in matters of the law of God. Now, on the first round, we have to remember that there's no longer a pillar of fire and a pillar of cloud. So they don't have that kind of direction. They they're submitting to Joshua when it comes to that. Joshua, you tell us where to go. You're going to direct where the tribes go, when we go, where we spread out, where we camp, where we don't camp, when we move from camp. All of that is now going to be decided by Joshua. Now, as we stated in season 5, there's a good indication that the pillar was gone for about a year now, maybe up to 2 years. So Moses was that role, and Joshua was going to take over that role. And the elders were saying, yes, we submit to that. We trust that Joshua is just like Moses. Now, Moses obviously was like huge. Even now he's considered like the most powerful prophet leader that the nation of Israel, ever had. But Joshua was picked by Moses. Now, why was he picked? I mean, he picked him really in Egypt. Exodus 17. Joshua is chosen to lead a battle against the Amalekites. So Joshua's already in the leadership realm. He's already considered an elder in the nation of Israel when Moses hits the road. So he's aware of Joshua. He knows Joshua probably from his first arrival, when he started to present to the elders, hey, I'm here by the call of God. I'm here and I'm going to talk to Pharaoh, and we're going to get you 3 days off to go worship in the wilderness, in the desert place. And we're going to worship our God, and we're going to, celebrate him and spend all our time with him, all that kind of stuff. So Joshua was probably a part of that meeting. And I'm not saying that very day something hit Moses, but you have to remember Moses is now somebody who regularly speaks with the Lord. And so there could have been a quickening in his spirit from that first moment. And that happens a lot of times with people that I know, people I'm aware of anyways, that have a really good, I would say like easy connection with God. Everybody has a connection to God. God's always talking. He's always speaking truth and hope and love and joy. And our awareness of it allows us to operate here in this world as he would do it, because our awareness of his words allow us to approach everyday life with hope and joy and love and revelation. So Moses could have looked at Joshua that very day and thought, whoa, something's there. I should pay attention to this guy. The Lord has, quickened me about him. That's a good Christianese. You like that one, Bob? Quickened? He quickened my spirit. I don't know. It kind of fits though. You do. When I've had that kind of drop in me, when I've met somebody and thought, whoa, like it is. It's almost like, whoa. It is a quickening. I don't know how else to say it. Something goes faster. Your heart pitter patter. I do think sometimes people that are unaware of how God speaks to them, sometimes they go pitter patter when they see somebody of the opposite gender, and they think, oh, I must be in love. Not necessarily true. Not necessarily true. I didn't say it wasn't true, just not necessarily. I do think it causes some confusion. And I've talked about that, I don't know where. I don't know even. Anyway, I'll talk about it again. There are some times, especially younger people, where their spiritual awareness and their insights allow them to speak deeply into someone's life of the opposite gender, and they get misinterpreted as somebody who is in love. They just start to think, wow, like I really, that person really knows me. That person speaks to my heart. That person is intimate. The into me they're seeing, right? Intimacy. And it gets twisted. It does. And especially, I say young, it doesn't necessarily mean in age. I just mean immature in your ability to hear. Sometimes you get immature people and they hear stuff like that and they're like already married and they start to think, oh, this must be the Lord telling me that I'm supposed to be with someone else, that I picked the wrong person. And there's, I don't know if you paid attention, but at the time of this recording, there's a fairly large ministry that I didn't even know. I mean, I was unaware of them. That doesn't mean they weren't large. Just I don't get cable, haven't had cable, in my RV for a long time. So I was unaware of some Christian programming, but evidently there's a pretty large program that, had that very thing happen, where there was this God anointed divorce that occurred, and they were, they immediately married somebody else who I think was also a marriage counselor. I don't know. It was kind of twisted. I don't need to get into all that, but along that line, sometimes when you're immature, you think the insight and revelation that the Lord gives you into someone's life is an indication that you're supposed to be with that person. And it's not. That's what I'm here to say. I'm here to say, don't do it. Back it up. Relax. And let's work out the details in a more communal way. And by that I mean bring some other people into your world, and don't just keep saying, God told me. Anybody who's very mature in their release of, shall we say, the prophetic, the release of revelation, it doesn't have to back it up or protect it by saying, God said, God told me this. God told me this. Because when you speak the revelation of truth and joy and love and hope, when you speak that, those who listen, the Spirit quickens within them. Their hearts are moved. They're like, yes, that's God right there. Like I can hear the voice of heaven in what that person's saying. And they don't equate the person with God. And that's the other thing. A lot of times immature people will equate themselves with God, or want you to, equate them with God. It gets twisted out there, folks. Then it gets religious and it gets all kind of crazy, and then people get hurt. Don't do it. Don't do it. Stay loving, my friends. All right. So Josh, I don't know what he saw or heard when he saw Joseph, but he knew him, and he knew him for a while, and he learned to trust Joshua. And he trusted Joshua to a huge task of going up against the Amalekites. And if you remember, Moses was more than qualified to lead the battle. He was a renowned Egyptian general. He knew how to lead battles, but he trusted it with Joshua. We went through that whole thing. I still learned so much during that time about how a good leader doesn't just give somebody a title. He gives them the freedom and the authority and the freedom to use that authority in accomplishing the tasks however they see fit. And Moses did not run onto the battlefield and start second guessing Joshua. Instead, he stayed off in the distance and in essence prayed over Joshua so long and so hard that his friends had to help him hold his hand up. And they had to get seats. Moses interceded for Joshua. He didn't interfere with Joshua. Oh, that's a good word. That'll preach right there, Bob. But that's another whole season ago. So we're not gonna worry about that. A couple seasons ago now. So after the victory, right, Moses again, he praised and exalted Joshua before the people. He didn't take credit for himself. He didn't say, I came up with this great plan to let Joshua do this. He gave Joshua full credit and acknowledgement amongst the people, and the people started to recognize the leadership of Joshua. So Joshua taking over for Moses was not a flippant thing, and it wasn't something that came as a surprise to some people. They recognized that Joshua was going to be the next leader. And I'm not saying politics weren't involved in the transfer, but I have a feeling there wasn't much pushback because everyone knew they trusted Joshua. Joshua had been so much a part of everything that Moses was doing. Joshua was seen at the door of the tent where Moses was meeting and talking with God every day. Joshua followed Moses to the tent every day. And the first person Moses would speak to about what he and God had discussed was Moses, as he opened the door, curtain, whatever. How do you get out of a tent? A flap? As he opened the flap, he would see Moses there, and Moses would then see Joshua there, and Moses would then have the conversation with Joshua as they walked back to wherever it was that they were going. And that had to be phenomenal, but it also pointed out to the people that Joshua was a very trusted individual. And Moses shared all that he heard from God with Joshua. And of course, Aaron. Yes, I know. Yes, Aaron. Now, Joshua was chosen to be one of the 12 spies that went out to the promised land. Remember, Joshua was with Caleb and they fought to follow God into the land. They trusted that God could overcome whatever obstacles that they saw. You remember that the people, the other 10 were probably, some were dealing with victim mentalities, some were dealing with probably some, some power, not struggle, power play where they had a chance to control where the nation went. They didn't trust Moses. They didn't trust God, or they wanted to, whatever. Like there were all kinds of dynamics involved in the 10 that all night long they spread these negative rumors. By morning, everybody was up. And not everybody 100%, but generally speaking, everybody was against going, except for Joshua and Caleb. They maintained their stance. But if you remember, Joshua didn't share at the meeting with the 12 spies. Only Caleb did, because everybody figured what Joshua was going to do. Moses understood, if I have Joshua share, and it's just gonna look like I'm stacking the deck. So only Caleb shared at that time. But Joshua was only one of 4 people that didn't die during the 40 years of wandering. Now, Joshua was from the tribe of Ephraim. And so like his great, great, great grandfather was the son of Joseph. So there's a connection there that I think is important. His tribe was grafted into the nation of Israel. He was brought before Jacob. And if you remember, when they were going to be blessed, Jacob crisscrossed his hands, and Joseph was like, "Father, the oldest one is on your right hand, not your left." And he goes, "No, I'm going to bless the younger over the older." So Jacob blessed Ephraim, the younger, over the older brother Manasseh. So we got 200 plus years since then that the tribe basically has had dual connection until they left Egypt 43 years ago. They were kind of seen as dual citizens. They had access to the history, the story, the education, and the connections from both nations. Now, I'm not saying they went to Egyptian schools, but because of their heritage under Joseph, they would have had access politically and educationally to different levels than the people that were just, quote, pure Hebrews. And Joshua would have seen the transfer of his people from in exchange for security and freedom. They would lose freedom. And we went through all that in the book of Exodus. But Joshua would have been aware of that, because his people, more than anything, right, they were direct descendants of Joseph. And Joseph could have easily maintained for his nation, for his tribe, for his family, his sons could have easily maintained. Whoa, Zacapa. Sorry, guys. Zacapa's doing good, by the way. Those of you that follow along at home. He just got a little nervous, heard something outside the RV. And if you know anything about Doxies, Dachshunds start at 100% volume. They do not work their way up from growling. They just start barking. Anyways, so that was Zacapa. He says hello. And evidently he doesn't hear the noise anymore, so we're safe. And yes, he's at my feet, as he usually is when I record, and he's chewing on a bone. So God bless his little heart. So Joshua, I think, would have been very aware of this exchange because it's only a couple years old in his history that his family went from literal royalty in Egypt to walking out as a immigrant nation with no place to go. Remember, when they left, they had no place to go. They just went wandering. I mean, as far as the Egyptians were concerned. And so this tribe of Ephraim and Manasseh, that tribe of people would have been seen as a very unique group of people, even amongst the Hebrews, even though They came from Joseph, and they, were from the line of Jacob. They understood that, but their mother was Egyptian royalty. Joseph was legit second in command of the world. And yet they chose to walk out. And Joshua would have been very aware of this because he was part of that generation that made the choice to walk out of Egypt. Joshua probably was about 40 years old when they started, because when he gets the turnover here, he's about 80, same as Caleb. So the loss of rights, the loss of honor, because of who you are and the race that you're connected to, Joshua's tribe would have been very aware of all this. And someone in his family line would have been the one that they said, all right, we are not, going to choose Egypt. We are going to choose to identify as Hebrews. Now, I know Joseph would have been the one who started that with the blessing of Jacob on his two sons, who were not, they weren't children at the time. But they were making a pretty big statement. And Ephraim and Manasseh would probably had to continually make that decision. Their wives would have been like, wow, are we really doing this? Are we going to raise our children Hebrew, or are we going to raise them Egyptian? But I still think they had access to some of the academics of the Egyptian world. So it had to be interesting to be part of that tribe. And I think part of that is why Moses recognized Joshua as a unique opportunity to be the next leader of the Israelis, of the Hebrews. I do think Joshua probably had a level of pride in choosing God over choosing Yahweh over the Egyptian gods. I think he, like Moses, saw himself as somebody who could have unified the two nations, like I went over pretty extensively in the book of Exodus. I think that was one of Moses's main goals, he saw himself as a unifier of Egypt and the Hebrews under Yahweh. Because of his understanding of both nations and the governmental paradigms of both nations, I think, Moses understood those things. I think Joshua did as well. I think both of them had some military training. Clearly, I don't think Moses would have given them the job of attacking and overseeing the troops of the to attack the Amalekites. I don't think he would have done that with somebody who had zero military training. Now, I don't know if he had it specifically with Moses, which would have been enough. Obviously, Moses was like I said, a decorated general within the Egyptian community, but that's where I think that he could have had access to some of this training. And maybe as a, quote, slave of Egypt, he served in the military, which would not have been unusual in that day, that slaves were part of the military if you had an aptitude for that. So maybe Joseph came from the military training. But Moses, Joshua would have been very aware of all that his grandfather had done to set up Egypt as a dictatorship, and how Egypt had completely, quote, lost or forgotten all that Joseph had done for them. And like I said, it wasn't that they had forgotten. It was that they chose to no longer recognize the Hebrews as having any input into their heritage. The Egyptians had, quote, forgotten who Joseph was. They gave credit to all the Egyptians that were involved in the government, not Joseph. And so Joseph was forgotten. And along those lines, I bring all that up because I think that it has to do with the character and with the dynamics of decision-making processes, which will come into play as we go through this book. And we see Joshua's plan. So Moses, I think, saw all of this in this 40-year-old elder from the tribe of Ephraim, whose name was Joseph. I don't know if he saw it. I don't know if he saw it day one, but as he saw it, he felt more and more connected to Joseph. And as he asked people about Joseph, he felt more and more connected to Joseph. Like it just constantly made sense for him to trust Joseph with more stuff, more responsibility. And Joseph feeling connected to Moses for the same sort of thing, understanding that the two of them had a connection to Egypt that other tribes did not, understanding military activities and how Egyptians think and where that comes from. I think helped their conversations. You know, there were times I have conversations with people that have dealt with religion. Doesn't matter your theology, right? The religion that I grew up in, which was ultra conservative Baptist, fundamental Baptist paradigm, is the same sort of religion mindset as charismatic Pentecostal mindsets. It's the same sort of control, fear, manipulation, guilt, shame. They just use different techniques to get it out there, but it's the same sort of thing. Let's make everyone comply with whatever it is that we want. The traditions, the activities, the expectations, all that stuff. So I think that there was a lot that Moses and Joshua connected on and continued to connect on in deeper and deeper ways. And they both kept choosing to follow God. And I think that made a lot of difference for Moses. I think anywhere along here, Joseph, will you stop with Joseph, Bob? Anywhere along here, Joshua could have decided to say, hey, you know, I have a role as an elder in my tribe. Like I got to spend more time with them. Or he could have said, well, Moses is with, in the tent of meeting, hanging out with God. I can go do other things now. But instead, he kept focusing in on tracking with Moses and understanding what the Lord had to say and listening to Moses's, shall we call, translation and application of what God had to say. And so I not only think that Moses felt connected to Joshua, but Joshua felt connected to Moses. And the more that they talked and the more that they hung out, the more he wanted to talk and the more he wanted to hang out. And I know that there are some people out there, you probably have that kind of connection with somebody. I mean, for me, I don't. I've had people that have influenced me for sure. And there's people I would love to hang out with at this level to see if it would ever develop into something like this. But I can't name somebody, or I probably would still be there. And I wouldn't be living as I am currently in an RV for the last 3 years, doing fine. I'm not making any money. I'm not losing a lot of money. But for Joshua, this was like, man, this is my connection. This is where I'm going to stay. So Joshua had that same sort of connection to Moses. And sometimes you can feel connected to somebody, they don't feel as connected to you. And that's what I kind of alluded to earlier. Like Joshua could have been like, Moses really likes me, but I like him. He's a good leader, whatever. But there's other things I want to do. I think that there was a deep interconnection between the two of them. One of the other paradigms that I think that the two of them shared was that dual perspective. Joshua would have wanted to see the nation united and be a power in the world, to have their own land and to have a powerful God. That's really important, I think, to Moses. Because Moses understood God's plan to be about power. Not powerful displays of love, but powerful displays of power. And I do believe, as you know, if you've listened to my other seasons, you know that I think that Moses took Abraham's covenant and filtered it through his experience with Egypt and turned it into something that has become what ultimately will be done in the promised land. And I don't believe it's the plan of God. But God, again, is not the type of leader who gives you authority and the freedom to use that authority and the power to enact that freedom. He doesn't withdraw it because you decided to do something he wouldn't have done. Instead, his goodness stays with you and refuses to leave you and makes good out of whatever it is that you've done, because that's who he is. And that's who he wants you to be. He wants you to use your freedom, your authority, and your power to be good and to do good and to make good things happen out of other people's bad choices. And that's the pattern we see in the heart of God all through the Old Testament, and we will continue to see it as we continue to study, as we continue to move forward in the book of Joshua. We see there in verse 1, I'll read it all the way through. Let's get to Joshua chapter 1. Now, after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, it came to pass that the Lord spoke unto Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' minister, saying, and there we see that the Lord is going to speak to Joshua just like he spoke to Moses. And we will see if Joshua makes an adjustment in the way that he translates and applies what he hears from God, or if he does it just the way that Moses has been training him to do it. And we'll discover that next week on The Epic Narrative.
Don't go anywhere. We've got Bob thoughts.
All right. Sorry. Here's my first thought. My first thought was, oh my goodness, did you hear me flip Joshua and Joseph's name for like 10 minutes? I can't believe I did that. I really, I wish I had listened to this recording a while ago. I probably would have been like, Brian, I need to read you season 1, episode 1. Oh my gosh. But that's what you get here at the Epic Narrative. You get the raw stuff. I don't have production. I mean, I have a wonderful producer, and I know you know Brian. He does a great job putting this stuff out on the podcast platforms for me and keeping track of everything. He's amazing. But yeah, I don't have production. And yes, I mean, just a reminder, like Bob the engineer is just the voice in my head. It's really not a guy on the other side of the glass. I just like to imagine my voice in my head on the other side of the glass. Oh, glory. Anyways, I appreciate you guys sticking with me. We have launched it. I know we didn't get far today, but I always think background information is important, and I know we kind of wandered down some trails, and that's the way we do things as well a lot of times. But I think it's important to understand where Joshua came from and why he meant a lot to Moses, and his connection back to Egypt. I think played a big part. Played a big part in all that Moses saw in this young man when he first adopted him and started mentoring him. And then, of course, we're talking 40 years later, by the time he takes over. So, yeah, it's Joshua is an amazing study, and I think you'll really enjoy the entire season as well, or just specifically this book. Some of you might be listening just going, hey, I just want to hear about Joshua. So one of the another little thought I had was, a lot of times we look at the Promised Land as we go into it here, into the season. A lot of times we look at the Promised Land, we get kind of tunnel vision on it. We look at the Promised Land and we think that the history that we hear of the Promised Land in the Bible is the only history of the Promised Land, and it's not. You read the Canaanite, history, and they talk about the Hebrews coming in. It's not a pretty history. These guys came in and tried to take over their land. You read about other tribes and nations around the area it's not quite as sanctified as the versions that we get when we're in Sunday school, where it just sounds like, yeah, it just sounds like everything's great. Hey, God promises land to these guys. I guess we should just, get out the way. Anyways, always interesting to hear other perspectives, and you will hear other perspectives throughout this season on all of this stuff. And I did clear my emails. I did. Years and years ago, I thought it was really appropriate to start having files in my Gmail and sending, emails directly to these files. And I don't know what clicked, but after I said what I said in the beginning of this episode, I was like, I'm just going to wipe out. I don't need these files. Like, this is from years, 10, 15 years ago. And I just started wiping out files. And all of a sudden, my unread messages disappeared. I no longer had one unread message. I was so excited. I had to tell you. I probably told you again, because I probably did it and then recorded the next episode. I probably told you again. Anyways, you're going to find out. I'm very excited. In fact, I have 0 unread messages on my Gmail. I literally, while I study and write down notes, I periodically just check my phone. I know it's probably an OCD thing. I just will and be like, oh, I have promotions, and I'll just wipe out the promotions. I have social emails. I'll just wipe those. Like I can't stand knowing that there's something there that shouldn't either be trashed or read. But that's just who I am. And you guys who follow me, you know that. This year, my goal is to raise $5,000 for the podcast. That would include a whole new dynamic of promotion. We really are starting to find a demographic, and I do believe we have enough content that if people find us, they've got plenty to listen to, even if they don't want to necessarily, start with the new season. There's plenty. There's 245 episodes now to go to, and they can listen to a lot of different things and get a good picture of who we are. And so if you want to give, I would greatly appreciate it. I really would. We got, I also want to do more production, which will involve, some software, not really hardware. We got that new computer a couple seasons ago, and it's a rock star computer. We'll be fine on the computer for a few more years for sure. But we'll have some hardware we need to get, some tools we need to get, and maybe who knows? I would love to start doing a season visually as well. And I don't know what that means, but I would love to, and we need to start exploring that so the podcast can have a visual aspect as well. So if you can give, that'd be great. I take Zelle and Apple Pay. And some people just, you can just send me a check too. I'm not a nonprofit. I know for some of you, that's a risk you don't want to take. I completely understand that, but becoming a nonprofit is a risk I don't want to take. So yeah, if you want, reach out. I'll give you the contact information, and you can send your donations to me directly. All right. I will see you again next week on The Epic Narrative.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening. If you like what you heard, you can subscribe to this podcast on any platform you use. You can also reach out to Bob for questions or booking at thebobswitzer.com or email him at thebobswitzer@gmail.com. See you next week, guys.